We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and hot dogs get a bad rap. They got a cool shape, they got protein. You like hot dogs, right? Andrew, you like hot dogs?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
The local fast food joint, Portillo's, sells hot dogs, and I love it.
Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's M Night Shyamalan month, and this week we are talking the 2008 film, The Happening. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my environmentally conscious co-host, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I do drive a hybrid, so
Hey, you're doing your part.
I'm something. I recycle, but anyway, yeah. Had never seen this one, so I was excited to dive into it. Knew the sort of twist, which isn't really a twist.
I would say this is
one,
not a twist movie.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more, but we can wait for the actual episode. But it's odd that the last movie he did and this one both don't really have the signature twists that everyone loves to like keep pretending that he did. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a thing he likes to do, but like we've got 2 movies in a row now where he doesn't do that. But yeah. So knowing the legacy, knowing the kind of history, I was super interested to finally dive into this one and see what it was all about.
Well, I saw this movie in theaters opening.
Man, you
weekend.
just when did you actually jump off the M Night train?
June 13th of 2008, I would say.
Okay.
I saw this movie because in my mind, remember, I love The Village. So while I did not like Lady in the Water, I was like, okay, he had one misstep, right? He did this.
Yeah.
I kind of saw Lady in the Water as an ego thing, not even because of all the film critic stuff, but like he turned a bedtime story into a movie. And I was like, all right, he kind of just did this little passion project movie. I don't know. I wrote it off very quickly in my mind. And I was like, let's get back to what you do, M. Night. And this was, I think I said last episode, they marketed this as the first R-rated movie from M. Night Shyamalan. That was the hook of the marketing. And they didn't tell you much in the trailers, but there was glimpses of some of the pretty brutal stuff that you end up seeing in this movie. Like, that it goes places. And I was on board. And I saw this movie in San Marcos. I saw this movie with my old college roommate. I went to U of H for exactly one semester. I decided that wasn't for me, that I no longer went to college. But I was, I had a roommate, a dorm roommate, and we kind of kept in touch, and we lived in different cities by then, but we were both going to be in San Marcos. Like, hey, let's get together. Let's go see a movie. And I picked The Happening. I was like, yeah, the new M. Night movie. Let's go see it. This movie comes out the same day as The Incredible Hulk, the Marvel one, the Edward Norton one. And that just makes so much more sense for like 2 dudes who know each other from college go see a popcorn movie. That seems like the obvious one, but I insisted on seeing The Happening. We'll get to my overall. Like, I didn't hate this movie the way many people did, but my former roommate certainly did hate this movie. And I haven't talked to him in a long time. Zubair, if you're out there, hit me up. Some of you remember the story, but every time we talked, like after that, he's like, dude, remember when you made us go see that stupid movie about the trees. I was like, I thought that would be good. I'm sorry. So yeah, not only did I see this opening weekend, I dragged someone to see it, and they never let me forget it. But I will say, we'll get into more details as we go through the episode. I texted you, Andrew. I was like, my hot take on The Happening is I don't hate it. It is the movie that kind of broke me as far as like, all right, M. Night's name being attached is not enough for me to get hyped for a movie anymore. But there's stuff I like here. And of course, we're going to talk about it. That's what we do. #Positivity Podcast. We're here to talk about everything that works in this movie. And hey, I've got some things to say about it. And so do a lot of people. Between recording our last episode and this episode, we did break the news to everyone. Our theme of the month is M. Night Shyamalan. And we got a bit of a reaction in our Discord and on social media.
A reaction, you say?
Yeah, a lot of people seemed excited about this. And there was quickly debate as far as like what even are the quote-unquote bad movies. Some people were surprised that we're covering The Village because they liked the movie. And we already covered that. A pretty bad critical reception. But, we liked it. I certainly liked it. Andrew, there were more than one person defending Lady in the Water. Friend of the show, Zavazza, threw their hat in the ring. And Andrew, I'll be honest, I asked these people in various Discord servers, and I was like, hey, what are your positive thoughts on Lady in the Water? What did you like? Because, Andrew, you and I both, that one was certainly a challenge, I would say. And the general vibe was like, it's like a modern fairy tale. I could get on board with that. And we even went as far as to make a rear window comparison, because the way the entire movie takes place in a apartment complex full of various characters. And yeah, I guess technically that is true. Both movies do that. And if there is, my biggest positive takeaway from Lady in the Water probably is that there's a good variety of characters, but that's about as far as I can go with my positives there. We got a lot of Robot Chicken references with M. Night Shyamalan. What a twist. People are ranking their M. Night movies, which I think you and I will probably be able to do by the end of this month. A pretty good reaction. People seem excited to revisit a lot of these movies.
Yeah, I think the legacy of M. Night has really made people not, I don't want to say they're not open to watching his movies, but I think it's definitely turned some people away from them, when I think there's some stuff to like. I think I actually got into it with somebody, not really got into it, but I had a discussion with a friend about The Village, and he was talking about the ending. And he was like, it doesn't really work. And I was like, yeah, but like the movie sets it up. Like the clues are there. Like the clues are all throughout the movie that's the twist. Like it's not really as out of nowhere as people present it as. And I think with a lot of his movies, you've kind of got this built-in gut reaction that doesn't necessarily speak for the movie itself. So, yeah, there are dozens of us, apparently.
Well, this week it's all about The Happening, the movie that was released June 13th of 2008, made on a budget of $48 million, right in line with most of his filmography. At the box office, it does bring in $163.4 million. That's significantly higher than Lady in the Water. It's not quite as much as The Signs. It's not quite as much as The Village. It is probably not as much as the studio wanted, but it's tripling the budget, over tripling the budget. I mean, that's profit. That's a success. That's dare I say, a hit movie. However, it is absolutely panned by critics. It holds an 18% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Under 20%, it's hard to do. This movie does it. Audience score is also very low. 24% audience score. It's typically a little bit higher than the critics. But look, no one is singing the praises of this movie. It doesn't really seem to have a following like a movie like The Village might have. I haven't seen a lot of critical reevaluations. I mean, this one is. I think he would go on in his career to have lower lows critically, but I think up until this point, this is considered his worst effort, which is kind of wild.
It is pretty wild to think about. This is his lowest budget since The Sixth Sense. He after Lady in the Water kind of tanked, he was struggling to sell his next script. He had a lot of meetings, a lot of pitches, but nothing really took. So he took a lot of those notes, took them back, ended up rewriting the script to a degree, taking a lot of those notes, and then ultimately, once that was done, 20th Century Fox comes in and picks it up, and he's able to start running with it. And I assume getting that budget lower was probably part of the discussions. They probably weren't as willing to give him the kind of 75 million that he'd gotten on things like Lady in the Water or Unbreakable. They wanted something a little bit scaled back. And like you said, financially, the money's there. This is call it a $50 million movie that makes $160 million. That's 3 times the budget. That's profit and then some. So your rule of thumb, we've explained it before. Hard profit is when you've kind of doubled the budget, but you consider marketing and theater takes, things like that. Usually once you've got double the budget, that's when you're in the black. And so in this case, you've got 60 plus million in the black, which is it's enough for me to disappear on, that's for sure. But
it's also good because, I mentioned it was a little bit lower than The Village, but considering this is an R-rated movie, it's expected to be a little bit lower. Like those typically just don't gross as much.
Was The Village not R-rated?
No, this was his first one.
Interesting. Hot take. I don't think it needed to be. But like,
I mean, there's
you got a lot of dead bodies
images.
here. So
yeah, there's
that's true. Yeah,
blood squirting out of a bullet hole in a cop's forehead. I mean, lion ripping a guy's arms off. There's some pretty.
Did I watch the wrong movie? No.
Okay, as we've been talking about, this movie is written, produced, and directed by M Night Shyamalan. Now, something I've always remembered about him talking about this movie in the aftermath is his, I won't say a defense of it, but I remember the quote in my head, but I wanted to find the article it came from. And I actually found a newer article than the one I remembered. This one's from 2019 when he's promoting Glass, but he's basically saying the same thing as I've always remembered. He says he defends The Happening by stating, the reason The Happening was critically panned was because of its tone, which was aiming to feel like the best B movie you'll ever see. And he adds, I think it's a consistent kind of farce humor, like The Blob. The key to The Blob is that it just never takes itself that seriously. And then he also says that he thinks audiences missed the self-conscious humor in The Happening because it was inconsistent. And he says that's why they couldn't see the tone he was going for. I don't know. As someone that kind of, I don't know, I guess I kind of have a soft spot for this movie. Like, there's some things I like about it. I don't understand what he's saying here. He was going for a beat. It feels like, to use a modern term, a little bit of copium. It's sort of like how Tommy Wiseau claims he was intentionally making a bad movie and made The Room, when it's very clear that that was his earnest attempt. Like, I don't feel like he was trying to make a B movie. However, it does seem in line with environmental disaster movies of the 70s and 80s. So I in some regards, I do get it. I do get that he's going for a genre film, and there are parallels there. But I think whenever, I don't know, someone mocks, say, a line delivery by Mark Wahlberg, I don't think you can go back and say, oh yeah, that's the performance I wanted. That's the tone I was going for. It doesn't read that way to me.
I don't really like when directors kind of, and I get it, you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into these movies, especially in M. Night's case where he's writing and producing them as well. And when they're not well liked, I imagine there's a gut check defense that comes in of just like, well, you didn't get it. And that kind of sounds like what he's saying there, just a really fancy version of you just didn't get it. I guess there's a little bit.
He does say
There's a little bit of reflection there.
Yeah, he says
Right,
he was
like-
inconsistent with the tone. So I appreciate that he takes some ownership at least.
But it's always odd to me because I've seen that defense of things a lot sometimes where they're like, we were trying to make a B movie. And that, to me, and this may be seen as a hot take, this may be seen as disrespectful, and I apologize if you think so. It seems odd to me because it sounds like they're saying, in effect, we were trying to make a bad movie. Like, that's what, when I hear B movie,
Yeah.
we're trying to make a B movie, it's like we're trying to make a bad movie. I heard this once when, like, God, what was it? I had a friend when the Cloverfield Paradox came out, the third one in
The
space.
Netflix one?
Yeah.
Okay. I never saw that one.
And it got panned.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was very clearly like, don't they understand this is supposed to be pulp? And I was like, well, I'm a no pulp man myself when it comes to juice, but
Absolutely not.
But you like pulp in your juice or no pulp in your juice?
Absolutely not to pulp. I agree with you. No pulp is the way to go.
Side note.
Why do you
Christmas.
why do you like, oh, I love the taste of orange juice, but you know, it'd be better if little strings tickled my gums as I drank it. Like, what is the advantage of pulp? Why does anyone want this?
My dad on Christmas, my mom sent him to the store to get juice, and he got orange juice with high pulp. And we were all
High
like, why
pulp.
have
Like,
you
you're
done
asking
this?
for more pulp. That's insane.
It's like, why don't you give me a glass of that juice so that I could chew on this for a while? But anyway, not pulp, the pieces of fruit and juice. The pulp is in like the kind of genre, your pulp thrillers of the 30s and 40s. And this friend was basically saying that the movie was supposed to be pulp, which means it was supposed to be bad. And that's always such a strange thing to me when you ride that fine line of like, we were trying to make a really good B movie, when what B movies are known for are like tight budgets,
Camp.
and admittedly camp, like, lousy effects, like stuff that holds them back. That's why they're B movies. And when you say we were trying to make a B movie, I'm just like, but you had $50 million to make this movie. Like, you can't make a B movie when you're working with things like that. And they're like, oh, well, it's tongue in cheek. It's this. And like, same with Cloverfield Paradox, where it's like, it's supposed to be pulp. It's like, it just feels like you're dancing around a lot of ways to say you were trying to make a movie that was kind of bad. And I don't really understand that. And I'm sure that's not what they
to be
mean.
honest-
I'm sure there's more to it, but I don't know.
I would just to your friend that I don't think I know. I reckon because I've said, I don't know, maybe similar things before. Like, whenever you're talking about your opinion on a movie, I just recommend being like, you know what? I liked it. To me, it felt campy, and I liked the cheese, and I feel like I liked what they're going for, and that's fine. No one's gonna argue with you about your
all it
opinion.
takes.
It's whenever
Yep.
you start saying like, oh, critics don't get it, they misunderstood it, where you're trying to invalidate other people's opinions. That's when film discussion gets
Lost.
That's when I drop out of. I drop out of it.
Right. There's something interesting at that point because you're basically you're on a soapbox. You're being didactic. Like the minute you say you didn't get it, I think you've lost all sense of stance in the argument.
Yeah,
Because
you're not open for a
like,
discussion at that point.
Yeah, you just want to tell me that I don't get it, and it is interesting because it just reminds me a little bit of when people say they like things ironically, which is no different than liking something unironically.
Sure. But I understand why these terms pop up and why people say these things, because it is hard to quantify. Like, I love The Evil Dead 2. It's one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror movies. Actually, it's just called Evil Dead 2. Excuse me. The Evil Dead is the first one. Anyway, I love that movie. But like, I could imagine like if I read a review that was like, this movie is horrible. Like you could see like this makeup is so bad, you could tell it's not real. I would read that and be like, hey, don't you get it? That's supposed to be that way. That's what's enjoyable about it. So like, I do understand. It's just, it's so hard to quantify. Like, I like low budget, not all low budget movies, but with the low budget movies I do like, I like being able to see the seams. I like that you can see the filmmaker's passion. Like, let's just get this thing done however we can. I like the camp that comes with using very underpaid actors, but struggling actors, like paying them what you can. Like,
Oh my
I like all
God.
those things. Exactly. That's what we watched at the first Mac and Cheesy movie party, by the way, Troll 2.
I can't
like
help but
those
notice
things,
I
but
wasn't invited to that one.
You were probably in Delaware at that point. That was, come on.
Oh, Delaware! Don't remind me.
It is. I don't know. It is hard to quantify and hard to talk about. And look, just from someone who has certainly said some film snobby things in the past, like, my biggest
You and me
takeaway
both.
here for anybody is like, have your opinions, stand by them, and express them as exactly that, like your opinion and not the objective truth, and you will have much more fulfilling conversations about film.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I too am a recovering film snob. I know I had definitely had days where I was just like they'd announce a remake or something, and I would just be like, oh God, are there no
There's no
original ideas
originality.
left? Blah blah blah. Some movie would come out and the critics would hate it and they'd like it, and I'd be like, psh, if critics have no idea what they're talking about, they're all just dumb, they don't understand, blah blah blah. Like I did all that. I know I did, and like I wouldn't watch things because I was like, oh, that's not cinema, that sort of stuff. And now if I'm bored, I'll put Bring It On the TV because the Mighty Mighty Toros. But
Your house is a
it's-
cheerocracy?
yeah. It was actually funny when Liz and I first started dating. I really liked movies, and she was like, yeah, my brother's really into movies too, so there's a lot of crossover there. But then one day she came and I was watching Bring It On, and she was like, all right, you guys aren't the same. But,
To this day, if someone says like, oh, it's kind of cold in here, I go, yeah, there must be some clovers in the atmosphere.
boom, burr, it's cold in here. I say that to myself, like walking to my car when it's cold outside. Like I'll be like, burr. But anyway, needless to say, I don't really get what M. Night is saying there either. And I think copium is the right answer there. Where like there is some self-reflection there, some hey, I probably could have done this a little bit better. But overall, when you start venturing into the you didn't get it, that's where you lose me.
Hashtag PP. But today we're gonna look, M. Night, if you're listening, we're about to defend your movie. At the very least, just talk about the things that we think works, what we like about it, all the positives in the happening. Andrew, are you ready?
Yes.
When thousands of people near Central Park suddenly commit suicide, the country panics, fearing a new terrorist attack. As the airborne toxin attacks begin striking more and more cities, it is determined to be a natural compound as opposed to a man-made weapon. High school math teacher Elliot and his wife Alma find themselves on the run with mobs of other civilians fleeing the cities for small towns where hopefully the attacks aren't occurring. But as more and more people in the rural countryside begin offing themselves, Elliot, Alma, and a friend's young daughter named Jess seek refuge in a country cottage to hopefully wait out the event together. Andrew, a term we've used a lot on this podcast is a pre-9/11 movie. And usually we're talking about the inherent innocence that comes along with that, and how post 9/11 there's a lot of metaphor, there's a lot of darker undertones. I don't think we've used this term yet, but this movie is a very post 9/11 movie. The
Yes.
fact that everyone thinks terrorist attack right away is something that was in the air. Sorry, no pun intended, for a very long time after 9/11. Not just, I mean, just in real life, but you see that reflected in movies a lot. Like, speaking of Cloverfield, the first Cloverfield, someone distinctly says, like, whenever they I think when they knock this head off the Statue of Liberty, they're like, "Oh, is it the terrorists?" Like, that's the first reaction to an attack. It's terrorism. It's a terrorist attack. It's attack on a nation. And this is 2008. I mean, we're a few years out from 9/11 by now, and it's still like prominent in a way that hasn't really gone away, but is definitely still there, I would say.
Chris, we're 22 years past 9/11, or 23 years, almost 23 years past 9/11 now, and we're still living in the ramifications of that. So yeah, it's such a weird thing to quantify, because, like I said, you'd watch a movie in the 90s about terrorists, and it was just, I don't want to say fun, but like they were just like the quirky bad guys. Like
it was like
True Lies.
It's like what's the word I'm looking at? An archetype. A terrorist is like a villain archetype. Yes.
Yeah, like a trope. Like you just watch the
Yeah,
terrorists.
You're
they always
pirates,
lose.
you're cowboys, you're Nazis, you're terrorists.
You're terrorists. Like they always lose. Like, Arnold shoots the guy off a rocket and says some quip, and I can't remember. Oh, he says you're fired, and then fires the terrorist off a rocket in True Lies. And it's like, yeah, that's what happens to terrorists. So once that happened to us, it like changed the dichotomy. Now terrorists were like the ultimate villains, and if they were in your movie, they were super serious, and like they were dangerous, and they were terrifying, and you had to be scared all the time. And it's just, something was lost there. And like I can't imagine making a movie now like True Lies where the terrorists are just played the way they are, because I think everybody would be like, well, why aren't how can you not take this seriously? And it's like, well, I don't know. But yeah, this is definitely the jump to terrorist attack is definitely a post 9/11 thing, and I think this movie is definitely like the peak of that, at least at the time.
Well, we're going to talk about all of those parallels, and there's even a few parallels in this movie that seem somewhat more relevant in a post. Can we call it a post-COVID world yet, Andrew? I know COVID's still around, but post-pandemic, post-lockdown, it's a new reality again, which I think retroactively plays in this movie as well. We're going to talk about all that, but first we're going to talk about the cast of this film, as we always do, and we're going to start with the high point, the best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for The Happening?
I will be going with one of our more minor roles, but I think he actually adds an emotional level to the movie that I think is very understated, and I like it a lot. But I will be going with John Leguizamo as Julian. He's a mathematician that works at Mark Wahlberg / Elliot's school that is instrumental in them kind of leaving the city and kind of trying to find their way out, away from what's happening. And his performance, I think, is really, really good. He's got some really good scenes, some really powerful scenes that kind of like are in the face of adversity, the face of like this sort of pandemic that's happening in this movie. And I think he does a really good job with it. He's deeply concerned about his wife. We don't ever actually see his wife, but she was headed to a different town, so he actually leaves his daughter with Elliot and Alma so that he can go get her mom, his wife, and meet back up with them. He just doesn't want his daughter getting pulled into wherever he's going to end up. And he ends up perishing to the pandemic. One of our first main character to do so. In a really, really kind of chilling sequence of events. He's kind of, they're driving through this town and they see that the pandemic has affected these people, and they're all terrified. So they roll up the windows, they close everything, and he's like keeping her focused and like don't think about this. He's giving her math problems to do, trying to tell her to keep up, think about this, don't look at that, think about this. Trying to keep us cool in the face of this kind of terrifying situation. and it doesn't work out to his favor at the end. But the emotional level that he gives to it, the kind of investment that he has, that scene in particular in the car, I really like a lot as he's trying to fight back this thing that's happening. And see what I did there? But it's good stuff. So it's not a major role. He's not in the movie a whole lot. But I think the scenes he's there for, he's the standout in almost all of them. So John Leguizamo as Julian. Mark Strong.
I mean, a great pick. First off, alum of the show, John Leguizamo. We talked about him a number of times, like a Kick-Ass 2, he shows up. And also Spawn, where he also won a Mark Strong Award. So this is making John Leguizamo a 2-time Mark Strong Award winner. And,
also,
well,
go ahead.
Is there more we talked about him?
Yeah, Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, of course, Super Mario Bros. Yeah,
I thought that's what you were going to lead with. I was like, "What are you talking about?"
He's been in a lot, but I love. I moved to obviously got to talk about him a number of times now. I love John Leguizamo. I think he improves every movie that he's in. I think you can put him anywhere. He can be your lead. He can be your supporting. He can be a character actor, and he's always going to nail it. And other than his weird haircut in this movie, he is absolutely nailing it. He adds a lot. Screen time wise, maybe it's not a lot, but a pivotal character because one, he brings Jess into it. He's an emotional core early on, and he really calls out Zooey Deschanel's character, and she has an arc that really starts with him and his opinion of her. You know, he reveals to Mark Wahlberg's character that he saw her crying on their wedding day. She's not ready to commit. She can never be there when you need her to. And whenever he leaves his daughter, Zooey Deschanel's character takes his daughter's hand, and he says, "You don't take her hand unless you mean it." And he says it in a very almost threatening way because he just does not trust her. And she does go, like I said, that character goes on an arc because of this setup with John Leguizamo's character. Also, I want to say, it's a common trope especially in disaster movies and horror movies, of a parent like in a situation where they got to leave their kid with someone or in a safe space so they can go back into danger and do something. I'm going to say this phrase as a parent. I think that is insane. There is no fucking way I am leaving my kid anywhere in a time like this. I'm not letting him out of my sight. I don't care what is happening. I could not imagine walking away from my kid, but it is, it adds a lot of drama to your movies. I think that's why we see it so much. But, I mean, he's dead right then, right? Whenever he walks away from his kid,
yeah,
that's going to be.
The character. He's not coming back.
It is a brutal last scene. We'll talk about it when we get to scenes, but yeah, I think this is a great pick. I mean, John Leguizamo.
Yeah, he's like you said, he's fantastic. His parts in the first John Wick is a standout. Like the whole "I heard you struck my son." Yeah, because he stole John Wick's car and killed his dog, sir. Oh, like that's like one of the most iconic exchanges from the first movie. Sets off the whole events. He was just in The Menu, which I really like a lot.
Yes, yeah,
I like that one a lot. He was in Violent Night, the David Harbour Santa Claus movie, and then he's also a thug in the ultimate pre-9/11 movie, Die Hard 2, because not just is that movie about terrorists, it's about terrorists at an airport. So he's both in the definite pre-9/11 movie and the definitive pre-9/11 movie and the definitive post-9/11 movie. So
Andrew, please
what a range, what a career.
Say the full name of the title.
I want to clarify something here. Die Harder is not part of the title presented within the film, but there are places where it's called Die Hard 2, Die Harder. Now, the poster has Die Harder on it, but the movie only ever says Die Hard 2, I believe.
Interesting. So, this is
it's one of those things where
Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery situation, huh? Where the marketing kind of becomes part of the title.
And to be fair, Ryan Johnson said very clearly, this movie's called Glass Onion. The movie, in the movie itself, the title card only says Glass Onion, which how it should be.
So is it really? My whole life I've always thought it was Die Hard 2, Die Harder. Is that just the tagline that we just associate with the movie? What's on the spine of the DVD? That's going to be the definitive from me.
I think it's just Die Hard 2.
Interesting.
I'm looking it up. Looking on the eBay to see if anybody's selling a used copy. What do we got? Is this DVD on the cover says Die Harder? I can't see the spine. Here's a Blu-ray. What does this say? This one also says Die Harder. So I guess it has become the de facto tagline, but I'm pretty sure it's not shown in the movie itself.
Interesting.
I was also watching it during my fever haze, so maybe I'm forgetting, but I don't think it's actually in the movie. You ever seen the joke trailer for Die Hard 12, Die Hungry?
No, I have not.
Die Hard in the grocery store. It's from the very short-lived Ben Stiller show, starring Ben Stiller as John McClane. But yeah, it was. It's funny that joke trailer was made, I think, before 3 of the Die Hard movies got made. So the irony.
John Leguizamo, great pick for Mark Strong Award. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper for a Mark Strong Award. I'm going to go really into like a bit player, but they pop so hard in this movie. They are one of the things I remember most clearly about seeing it. And I think they are an essential ingredient of this film. I am going to give my Mark Strong Award to Frank Collison as nursery owner. We don't even learn this guy's name in the movie. But this man is so distinct looking. That's the nicest way I can say it. And his dialogue is so bizarre at times. It's not out of, like, look at this movie as a B movie, as a throwback. These movies often have someone that is kind of a loon to all the characters. They seem kind of just off their rocker. But then, like, they spout something that the characters read as nonsense, but ends up having a lot of truth in it. And he's the one that proposes that the plants are doing this. He says that there's some science they can back it up, the way they can communicate with each other, and he thinks this is a reaction from nature fighting back against humanity for what we've done for the planet. And ultimately, this movie does give you a lot of alternate explanations for what happens, but that seems to be the one that it really settles on and leans into the most, and the most likely answers that nature is fighting back. And he's the first one to recognize it. He is, he has a nursery. He works with plants all the time. And I like that trope. I think he plays it well. I love his hot dog dialogue, which is why I use it at the beginning of this movie. And like I said, he's just so distinct looking. But despite saying that, I didn't even realize the other things that I knew him from. Like The Village. He is the doctor in that movie, who also...
Yes, he is.
I don't think we talked about him specifically when we covered The Village, but had we done that, I would have said that man is really distinct looking because he is. He doesn't have a beard in that movie, though, so he looks distinct in a totally different way. He's also in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou in a memorable small part. So, just a great character actor. Pops up all over the place. They love using him in like sci-fi movies where they can throw some prosthetics on him because, again, Google him if you can't remember what he looks like. He's a distinct looking man. But he adds, if there's any like credence to M. Night leaning into the B movie thing, I think him, his performance, and his character all fall in line with that and fit that description because of how much of a trope it is. And I love his scenes. I think he adds a lot to the movie. We'll get to the performance of the main cast, but they are all more, we'll say, subdued. And he just pops in contrast to them in such a strong way that I've got no choice but to give him my Mark Strong Award.
I think it's a good pick. I agree. It's a very kind of small, memorable part. I thought you were going to be going with Jeremy Strong there for a second, but we're talking about diving in deep. But
man, we will.
Yeah,
I do love that performance, and we are going to talk about it. But
we're going to get there. No, it's interesting. Like just looking at his performances, and like you said, just looking back at his filmography. Like he was in an episode of the Twin Peaks season 3, like 5-6 years ago. He's in all these bit parts, shows up in all these I wouldn't say, a legend of the screen, but he shows up everywhere. Had a recurring role on Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. That was probably honestly one of the few regular things he did. He was on like 118 episodes of that show. Came back a lot anytime that kind of riled everyone back up together. He was in that Hitchcock movie with Anthony Hopkins. I remember him from a very, very small bit part in an episode of My Name is Earl. I don't know if you remember that show or not. It was one of my favorites when it was on. But it's, just you know him from somewhere. The question is just where.
Crabman went to my high school.
No kidding.
Yeah, not at the same time. He's older than me, but
apparently he's a weirdo. But
well,
not in a bad way. Not in a bad way necessarily, but apparently he is just a weird guy. But anyway, he is he was even in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's been everywhere, done everything. And like you said, his performance here is a standout. He's the first one that kind of proposes the notion that this might be plants, kind of further pushing that it's not really a twist. But good stuff. I didn't see it going that way, but I appreciate that it did.
It's a bit of a Justin Michael pick for a Mark Strong Award, I admit, but I felt strongly enough about it to go that way. All right, let's go to the top of the call sheet here. We have Mark Wahlberg as Elliot, the lead of this film. Before I talk about his performance as Elliot, two things to cover here. First thing, Mark Wahlberg can be a tricky person to talk about on a #positivity podcast because he has some incidents in his past that are well publicized. We don't need to get into it. Things he did when he was younger that don't look great. He has, by most way you look at it, moved past those things. The vibe I get is he's like, I was a different person then and I've grown, and that's fine. There's a whole conversation we can have here about should things from your adolescence be an albatross around your neck? Can we ever forgive somebody? Can someone ever really grow? I don't know. That's not a conversation for us to have here, but I do think we need to acknowledge it. Second thing I want to say about Mark Wahlberg is I like a lot of performances from Mark Wahlberg, and I like a lot of his movies, Andrew. Looking at movies from before The Happening, we have things like Fear, which I think he's good in. Boogie Nights, I still haven't seen, but I always hear that as like the quintessential Mark Wahlberg performance. I assume he's really good there. Three Kings, a cult classic from '99 that I love. The Italian Job is very popular. And then I definitely want to highlight I Heart Huckabees as probably my favorite performance of his from this era of Mark Wahlberg. Because sometime after this movie, Mark Wahlberg puts on like 20 more pounds of muscle and just transitions to a whole new phase of his career. But he's doing more character acty stuff during this period. Mark Wahlberg has a weird energy about him. He has I don't know. He kind of leans into the tough guy thing, starting with The Departed and moving forward. But before he puts on the weight, especially, he's just like something about like his energy and like his delivery, and like he's always so questioning, and like how everything sounds like a question always goes up at the end of his lines, huh? You know what I mean? And it's like, what do you do with that? Like, where do you?
Dude, that was really good.
In a movie?
That was unbelievably good. That was like spot on. Genuinely. Man, fantastic.
Well, I
was not prepared. I was not prepared for you to pull out a really good Mark Wahlberg impression on this show.
I don't know how I feel about my ability to do that, but thank you. I Heart Huckabees makes the best use of this weird Mark Wahlberg energy and line delivery, because I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but he plays a firefighter, but the movie is like a lot of like existential dialogue and like meaning of life stuff, and him trying to sort things out and figure it out with that questioning way of speaking that he has, I think is a perfect fit. So I want to highlight that. I also like the movie Rockstar. I think he's pretty good in it.
He has his peak as an actor comes 2 years after this, though. And it's in the movie called The Other Guys. no further notes.
That is pretty good. And also, that is all right. Speaking, I can't believe how much talking about Mark Wahlberg. Speaking of like his early phase of his career, and then like his tough guy phase, that's like right in the middle, right? And that is like the nerdiness of his early career with the tough guy appearance of his later career. Because after the other guys, he goes on to play sincere
like Lone
tough
Survivor and like he does stuff like that, and it's actually pretty wild because like the other guys exists in like. The Other Guys is a movie I would also agree, I think, uses Mark Wahlberg effectively. Like, he's put against Will Ferrell. He's kind of playing this tough guy that's kind of like a joke. So, like, the way he kind of erratically acts to things and stuff like that plays into how the character is because he wants to be this super tough cop, but, like, nobody takes him seriously. And he's teamed up with the cop who doesn't really want to be a cop. He just does desk work all the time. So it's another movie where I think Adam McKay in that case effectively knew how to use Mark Wahlberg. Also, underrated performance from The Rock, even though he
The Rock is okay. I was gonna say who's the Mark Strong in that movie because like Mark Wahlberg's doing a good job. Will Ferrell, Michael freaking Keaton, the greatest actor of all time, is in there. With
dude,
his...
I would have to give it to Michael Keaton. There's no way. Like I can't not.
The running
that.
bit of
the TLC
references,
like,
it's so good. It's so good. I love it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But you've also got Steve Coogan. You've got alum of the show, Ray Stevenson. You've got it's a stacked movie. It really is. And then that to me, that when I think of Mark Wahlberg movies that I actually like genuinely enjoy watching, The Other Guys might be on that list alone.
We're doing that thing where
#PP.
people are gonna say, "Oh, we can tell you don't like this movie because you're talking about everything but the movie." But I do have positive things to say about this movie, so I want to get back to it. But the reason I wanted to lead with all these other Mark Wahlberg performances is because #PP. Look, I'm not gonna say he's bad in this movie, but I am gonna say he is a miscast, and I think that's the nicest way you can say. Nice thing you say about this movie, like if there's the legacy of this movie is one, people say, "Oh, nature attacks," and it's dumb, and like you said, they incorrectly call it a twist when it's not. And the second thing is Mark Wahlberg's performance and his line delivery. Like that's the legacy of this movie. And again, this is the most #PP way I can say it. I think he's simply miscast. He's clearly not a bad actor when he's in the right role. I don't know how he was directed on set because M. Night had this B-movie mentality, apparently. So this might have been the exact performance he was looking for. I really don't know, but it is something that it's hard to really dance around. It's just not the best part of the movie.
I would agree. That was definitely when I was watching it. Like there's line deliveries where like in another movie, I could see that being like a joke or a punchline. I think it ties a little bit into M. Night kind of saying that like the tone was off because there's moments where he speaks and he says something where I'm like, is that supposed to be funny? Because like it feels like it's kind of supposed to be funny, but like nothing around him is funny. Like it's the one I texted you. He has a moment like this moment where he's getting super overwhelmed and he goes, "Be scientific, douchebag," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to laugh at that," but like it's in this deeply dire situation, so you're like, "But no, I'm not." Like, so you get this weird kind of clashing of ideals at times. That's not his fault. Like it's not on him. Like it feels like it's this weird thing where you've got like two things that are kind of going against each other, trying to exist in the same scene.
And that's the inconsistent tone that M. Night seemed to be referring to. Like audience missed it because I wasn't consistent with it. And one of my favorite quotes about directing is from M. Night Shyamalan, who says, "A director's job is to keep a consistent tone." I think about it all the time. It's a prism that I look through for most movies. And I think in general, with his good movies, his bad movies, what have you, M. Night is really good at that, a consistent tone. But here, if what he says is true, he was going for a B movie and going for some comedy, I can totally, I think we might have an inconsistent tone problem here. And, maybe it's more on M. Night than Mark Wahlberg.
I would be inclined to believe that it's a direction thing, but because, like I said, there's a good performance. He can be used effectively. So who knows? Like I said, it sounds backhanded, but this feels kind of like he's doing what's asked of him. And I would say, despite how odd the performance comes off, I think he is doing what's asked of him. As I think the larger issues with that mostly come down to direction. And he's making the best of it.
He is someone that has vocally spoken out against this movie afterwards. Nothing too harsh, but he's like, yeah, that was a bad movie. He told Amy Adams you dodged a bullet for not being cast, and he made fun of the trees thing. Didn't say anything bad about the people that he actually worked with. And I do like M. Night responded. He's like, you know what? He can have their opinion he wants. That's fine. And it all seemed very civil. But I imagine a conversation with like Donnie Wahlberg telling him like, dude, you got to work with M. Night. Like I had this bit part in The Sixth Sense. It totally revitalized my career. People still talk to me about this. It'll do so much for your career to work with M. Night. And then Mark Wahlberg does, and it's The Happening, and it has the complete opposite effect.
Oh, Donnie Wahlberg, stalwart of the Saw franchise. Woof. One day, I'm sure we'll get there, though, so I better not say too much.
Yeah. All right. Zooey Deschanel plays Alma Moore. This is Elliot's wife, but it's clear from the beginning there is some tension between the two. She is potentially being unfaithful. There's some hints about it before what's going on is revealed. But there's trouble in their relationship, and it's an undertone of most of this movie. This is from an era of Zooey Deschanel performances where, like, I didn't really know who she was at this time. But I feel like probably around the time of The New Girl, she really solidifies this Zooey Deschanel performance. I believe this is before Yes Man, I think, because that in my head, that kind of solidifies who Zooey Deschanel is, ultimately. But this is like movies like this, or, we've talked about her before on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. She doesn't have that hallmarks of her characters quite yet, is how I would describe it. Her character here is emotionally distant, a bit, maybe even, dare I say, aloof. But I like her character arc, maybe more than anyone else in this movie. I like where, I don't know, part of me, I think, kind of likes that it's the woman that has commitment troubles, because that's so often put on the man, and I like kind of seeing a different take on it here. And I like where her character ends up and how she gets there, and her relationship with Jess, and being committed to the relationship. I don't know. I like where the character goes, but she is being asked to be, like I said, be distant, and you feel that through most of this movie, that she's just a bit distant.
Yeah. Yes Man is the same year as this, by the way.
Okay. She gets to sing. I've said this on the podcast before. She gets to sing in that movie. She's the lead singer of a band called Munchausen by Proxy in that movie, and they made like 4 original songs in the soundtrack. They're one of the earliest purchases I made on iTunes. Those songs specifically, still like them. Highly recommend them. And so I associate that more with her because it showcases like her musical abilities and a little bit more of her quirkiness she'd become known for.
That was the winter. That came out in December, I think. This was more a summer thing. But yeah, I think New Girl is what kind of formalizes the Zooey Deschanel performance. 500 Days of Summer comes the year after this. I think that's another big piece in kind of her kind of moving towards what people kind of associate with her. Here she's doing something much different. Like you said, from the first scene, she kind of seems very detached. And throughout the course of the movie, we kind of have to watch her get slowly overcoming her issues, figuring out what's going on, and realizing that, maybe this is what she wants. And never have tiramisu with coworkers is what I'm also getting here. I don't know, though. She's an elf, and Elf is like 5 years before this, and that's pretty close to what she's known for. She sings in that movie, too.
She doesn't have glasses, though.
I guess that's it.
And I don't remember, does she have bangs? Bangs are a big part of her character, too. I don't
know. Jesus. All right, moving on from that because I think we're straying into some potentially troublesome territory. But yeah, she gets an interesting arc here, kind of taking on the mother role to Jess as the movie kind of progresses, and we realize that her parents are not coming back. And the arc that she makes, I think that is pretty well done. So,
and then we have Ashlyn Sanchez as Jess. This is John Leguizamo's character's daughter, who once she is left with Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel's character, they sort of become her pseudo parents, and by the end of this movie, are full on adoptive parents. It would seem she has a bit of growth as well, which I think is kind of nice. A lot of characters in this movie all have arcs, which I'd love to see from a storytelling perspective. She bonds with Zooey Deschanel's character because they both have a hard time expressing their emotions. They keep it all inside. Jess shuts down. She's unwilling to speak, and they bond over that. And by the end of this film, she's able to say, I love you to Jess, which is a really sweet moment. She's able to express herself a little bit more. So it comes a long way in that regard. But it's silent through most of this movie. M Night Shyamalan has a very good track record with child actors. Of course, Haley Joel Osment,
Osment
gets praised as one of the Osment, excuse me, forgive me. That gets praised as like an all-time great child actor performance. Abigail Breslin, her big break was in Signs, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which Culkin is in Signs, but very good child performances throughout his filmography.
Abigail Breslin's brother is in this movie, and we'll talk about him.
He is. We will talk about him. And I think this is great as well. Ashlyn, like I said, she's quiet through this movie, doesn't get a lot of scenes to really shine in, but does a great job. She was also a few years prior in Crash, where she plays Michael Pena's daughter. Phenomenal performance. I've got mixed thoughts on the movie overall, but that segment of the film I think is very effective, and in no small part due to her performance. It does seem like she retired from acting shortly after this film. I see no other acting credits. She doesn't seem active. I didn't Google her name to try to find out what she's up to because that's kind of strange, and I decided against it. So I hope she's living a happy life away from Hollywood if that's what she decided she wanted to do. But her short body of work has some impressive moments in it.
It's Rory in Signs, Rory Culkin.
Thank you. Is there 3 Culkins that act? Because there's which one is in Scott Pilgrim? That's not Rory.
Kieran.
That's the other one.
That's
Kieran.
That's the soda drinking kid from Home Alone. One and the same.
Got it.
Because that's the irony. Is Macaulay Culkin's the lead of Home Alone, but his brother plays his cousin that won't stop drinking soda, whose name I can't remember right now. But then, the Scott Pilgrim one, and then he was in, what was that, Succession, the big show recently that ended that everybody raved about that I didn't watch because it seemed too serious.
Very shortly, I'm going to talk about how much I have not watched Succession.
Yes, excellent, yes. Okay, moving on.
That covers our main players, our main cast. Everyone else is a supporting role and only has a few scenes as we kind of make our way through the story in 3 different locations. I want to talk about Betty Buckley, who plays Mrs. Jones, a character we see towards the end of the film. She's living like a hermit, totally cut off from society, doesn't even know that this event is happening. I love this character. I love this part of the movie. She reminded me a lot of a Stephen King character come to life. Someone living in the country that is very unsettling. She has these moments where she seems nice and kind, but will snap at the character, slap Jess's hand. She screams at Mark Wahlberg a number of times. One of the more famous scenes of the movie, she is screaming at him saying, "You're trying to steal my things." And Mark Wahlberg says, "What? No." And that line delivery has been memed to hell. And it's one of those things where
I think he says that after she says, "You're going to kill me. You're going to kill me in my sleep."
Oh, you're going to murder. That's right. You're going to murder me in my sleep. Yeah.
Which makes his response even more ridiculous. What?
Her half of the scene feels like this should be intense and scary, and his half seems like we should be laughing, and I don't know what you want from us, M. Night. What do I do?
Yeah,
but I
what do I
think she's
do?
super effective. She's so good. A ton of credits. I mean, she's been acting for a very long time. She's done a lot of theater. She's a singer, very accomplished. To me, her legacy is The Happening. It's the only thing I'm really familiar with, but I see that she was also in Frantic with Harrison Ford. I only know this movie exists because of the Bare Naked Ladies song One Week and the one line, like Harrison Ford, I'm getting frantic. That's how I know about this movie. And it's followed by the line like Sting, I'm tantric. Very strange song. She's also in Wyatt Earp, which I know is a big film as well. But like I said, for me, she's Mrs. Jones.
She's also on the show 8 is Enough for a great many years. And then you can see just a stalwart of television. She was on LA Law. She was on Oz. She was on even things as recently as a recurring role on Law and Order SVU starting in 2021. So still out there doing her thing. Has a music career. Does everything. Sang the national anthem at some football games back 10 years ago or so. So she's all over the place, doing everything. And she, like you said, a Stephen King character come to life. I could see that. Even maybe a few shades of what M. Night would go on to do in The Visit.
Yeah,
a few similar ideas at play there. Just this kind of very calm, almost motherly figure that then like snaps instantly, and suddenly you're a danger and you're a threat. And it's very well done. It's one of the more outstanding performances in the movie. Very unsettling. Kind of sets up what is effectively our third act climax in a lot of ways, where she's kind of the immediate threat in a lot of ways, and extremely effective.
Victoria Clark plays nursery owner. Is the wife of my Mark Strong Award winner, and she's good. I mean, they're all in scenes together. Obviously, with where I went with my Mark Strong Award. I mean, he's the one that his quirkiness is really supposed to leap out, but she's right there with him, packing those hot dogs, being a bit of an oddball. Victoria Clark, born and raised in Texas, which is cool. Fortunately, it's Dallas. I'll try not to hold it against her. But
man, we were
TV
just
work.
raving about the Iron Claw. So get over your thing with Dallas.
I mean, that was before we started the episode, Andrews. I'm not sure people will understand this, but
that's me calling you out based off previous knowledge our audience doesn't have. Now they do.
Fair enough. Stay tuned after the credit for some Iron Claw discussion. But journeywoman actor, a lot of TV credits, steady work, good stuff, good job.
Yeah, fantastic.
The aforementioned Spencer Breslin plays Josh. Again, Abigail was like, dude, you gotta work with M. Night. It's gonna propel your career. Spencer Breslin, I never made this connection before. Like, I see him in this movie. I maybe kind of recognize his voice, but I don't know who this actor is, except I do. He is the titular kid in The Kid with Bruce Willis. He's also in The Cat in the Hat. Possibly a movie we'll cover one day. I don't know. But he has, I would say, a distinct voice and way of talking that really stands out. And I don't know why I never put this together. But yeah, that's the same guy. That's Spencer Breslin. Him and we can go ahead and talk about Robert Bailey Jr. as well as Jared, because all of their scenes are together. The two teenagers that meet up with our main cast, and they I like the scenes where like they're talking to Mark Wahlberg and giving him like relationship advice. It's pretty funny. Ultimately meet a pretty gruesome end when they try to break into a house they think is no longer occupied. And then that person shoots both of them. It's pretty brutal. But I like both of their performances, like their addition to this movie. And Robert Bailey Jr. is an alum of the show because he was in Mission to Mars. I can only assume he was the son of Don Cheadle. I googled it, couldn't find a screen cap of him, but He's not on Mars. That's the only place I can think of that he would fit in. He also voices Wybie in Coraline, which most people probably know him from. But yeah, I love these two teen characters. I think they were a lot of fun, and then a lot of sad.
And then a lot of sad. Yeah, they add some kind of levity because at that point the story has gotten pretty dark. We're kind of in these fields and the virus is affecting these people and we're listening to this stuff happen. So they kind of are adding some levity and some kind of lightening the mood just a little bit. And then that mood turns dour very quickly again when they both meet a rather horrific, brutal end. And yeah, it's pretty gnarly. So, but yeah, good performances by both. Kind of bringing that kind of youthful innocence. Woof. Yeah, that was a tough scene to watch.
Last performance I want to talk about is Jeremy Strong as Private Oster. I love this performance. I love this character. I love that they're introduced. They roll up in like a big army jeep, and our characters have a little bit of hope, like it's the army. And as soon as he jumps out of the jeep and runs over to him, you're like, this is a scrub, a private, someone who's in way over their head and has no idea what they're doing. Just his body language of his run, you're already able to like tell, oh, his base got wiped out. He's the only survivor and he's in over his head. And then, of course, whenever you hear him talk, it's the same way. He once he hears about some of the other tragedies going on, he goes, oh, cheese and crackers. Just the sweet, innocent little baby who's got recruited to the army seemingly like 6 months ago. It's a really fun performance. Also, it meets a pretty gruesome end, but off screen. But he really pops. He really stands out. And I glanced over at his Wikipedia, and I saw that in 2022, he was featured on Time's list of 100 most influential people in the world. And I was like, why? I mean, is this guy an activist? What else is he doing? And I'm looking at his filmography. I'm not recognizing a lot, but he was on Succession. And that show is huge. I've never watched it. I'm sure it's good. I'm guessing that's what landed him on the list. I don't know what he does on the show. He must have a prominent role. I don't know. But he's really good in this movie. I will happily give him props for that.
I've seen him in a bunch of things. He's kind of interesting because this is like one of his first films. It's kind of one of his. He's done some theater stuff before this, but he's got 2 movies in 2008 that he does. And the first one is kind of a comedy drama that he's like deep in the cast for, very similar to this. But then he's got several featured scenes. I also remember him from The Big Shorts, where he plays a very different character than he does here. He's one of the ensemble that work for Steve Carell. It's him. Like Steve Carell's their boss. It's Jeremy Strong, one of the guys from the other Andy from Hot Fuzz, who's not Patty Considine, whose name escapes me right now, and it's actually going to make me mad. So I need to actually look it up before I get really upset. But Rafe Spall, is that right? No.
It's very important that you figure this out, Andrew. We'll wait.
Yes, it is Rafe Spall. I was correct.
Okay.
And then he was actually recently in a movie I actually really liked. It was called The Gentleman, which was a Guy Ritchie movie starring Matthew McConaughey as a kind of, he has a weed empire in the UK, which is a tough thing. Apparently a tough thing to do. So it's all about this weird kind of intermixed groups. It's very much a Guy Ritchie film, but he plays a guy that's interested in buying Matthew McConaughey's business, but may be up to some nefarious deeds. I like this movie a lot. Great performances from Matthew McConaughey and Charlie Hunnam, and he is no exception. I think he's really, really good in that. I, too, though, have not watched Succession. I heard everybody talk about it.
I hear the theme song is really good. I know that gets used a lot for like parody videos and stuff.
I do. I do remember he got in some not like bad controversy, but like he's apparently a method actor, and so he's like a proponent of like and he's like, I don't even call it character acting. I prefer the term like identity diffusion.
Okay, buddy.
And that just makes him sound like a pretentious jerk to me. Like it just makes him sound ridiculous to me. And like apparently on Succession, he would like intentionally like alienate himself from the rest of the cast. He would like be in this bubble and like he just didn't interact with people. Apparently super, super deep into his process, to which Brian Cox, another actor on Succession, said, and I quote, "Just act." That was what he it's like he thought method acting was kind of ridiculous. But needless to say, his performances get a lot of acclaim at this point. He's seen as like a very, very strong, I would say he's above a character actor at this point. He's become quite a successful actor in his own right. But it is interesting to see him here right at the beginning of his career, playing a much different character than he would definitely become known for later.
And with that, Andrew, I think it's time that we jump into the scenes of this film, starting with the best scene, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of The Happening?
I am going to go with the scene I alluded to earlier. It is John Leguizamo's death and kind of the lead up to it. Basically, he's going to Princeton, New Jersey, to try to find his wife. They get to Princeton and they see that there's people that are dead all over the place. And so he's, they're rolling up the windows, they're going through everything, they're trying to make sure this, and he sees there's a little slit, a little hole in the top of the Jeep. And he knows what's coming. Like it's this change in tone, demeanor, like he knows what's about to happen. And so he's like I said, he's coaching this girl. He's like trying to give her math problems so that she's not thinking about what's going on outside. The driver of this Jeep is Dante from Clerks. I don't know if you caught that.
I didn't. Wow.
I saw a look at his face and I was like, well, that looks familiar. And it is. So I was just like, what a weird little thing to do. But I guess they're headed to New Jersey, so it must be a Clerks thing.
Fun.
But I don't know if that's it or not. It might have just been that he was but hey, cool little thing for Brian O'Halloran to get to do there. But it's a great scene. He gets an emotional connection with these characters. He's trying to keep calm in the face of that adversity. And ultimately, Dante, I guess he wasn't supposed to be here today, either crashes the Jeep into a tree, he goes flying through the window. John Leguizamo stumbles out of the car, sits down on the ground, and ultimately commits suicide. It is
he cuts his wrist with the
pretty-
broken glass from the crash, Andrew.
I just
say it.
didn't. Man,
That's what happened.
you're talking about the Iron Claw. This stuff is just, man. I gotta tell you, watching the Iron Claw and then watching The Happening right after it, just a great feel good sense right there.
You watched them
just
basically back to back. You watched them the same day, right?
Yeah, I did. Because I watched Iron Claw and then I was it's at a nice little outdoor mall and it was snowing, so it was all really Christmassy, despite the fact it's January. And walked around, did my thing, and then went home and was like, well, I gotta watch The Happening, and turned it on and I watched immediately. Just met by mass suicides, and I was like, oh no, well, my mood for the day is ruined. It's not gonna feel good the rest of this day, that's for sure. But anyway, so that's how it ends. It is very brutal. It is very heartbreaking. Because he knows now that his wife is also dead. There's no way that she's survived at this point. So you've got a whole lot of emotion running through his character. You've got him still trying to keep cool in the face of adversity before ultimately he is unable to overcome this thing and is left like everyone else. And it's really sad. But it's very effective. And John Leguizamo carries this stuff really, really well. And yeah, it's a great scene.
It is a good scene. It is, man, when they roll in the town and the camera's panning and you see this landscaper vehicle, and then you see a bunch of ladders propped against trees, and then the final reveal of all these bodies hanging from the trees from garden hoses. That's some intense stuff. I actually remember they use this shot in the trailer, but they do it in a really fast jump cutting way, and they crop it so you just see like feet floating off the ground. You can't tell they're hung, and that almost looked like a rapture scene. Like it was very unclear what they were showing, but I remember them using this in the trailer for the movie. But as it plays out in the movie, it is super intense. It's gonna be weird to say, but I really like the nonchalant ways people die in this movie. It's all so matter of fact. The scene, the vehicle stops and then starts going again, speeds, and seconds later just smashes into a tree and they fly through. John Leguizamo stumbles out, sits down, very casually picks up a piece of glass and starts killing himself. It is so creepy. And for the score does a good job, like really under, I guess, heightening the atmosphere without making it feel jump scary or anything. Like, because again, it's the nonchalant nature that makes it unsettling. The score does a good job to highlight that. And this is a great scene of that. I like his character's way of, he says like people are calmed by statistics. He's always talking about probability throughout the movie, and this thing that he's trying to do for this girl to keep her focused by giving her math problems is very sweet. He's very paternal nature, is being a dad, trying to take care of the kid while they can. The realization, because by this point everyone knows it's an airborne toxin, so they're driving through this town that's obviously being affected. They got their windows rolled up, and then he looks up at a slit in the cloth top of the Jeep, and he just knows. And
he knows it's over, man.
The camera like slowly zooms in on this slit, which obviously without context you have like, no idea the implications. But knowing the airborne toxin, knowing the characters are realizing this, it makes for a pretty intense scene. So I think that's a really good pick for best scene, Andrew. I like it. I'm gonna go a different direction, but for very similar reasons. I like the very beginning of this movie the most. The opening deaths before we really know what's going on. We have two young girls sitting on a park bench when everyone freezes, which I am a bit curious how they do these scenes. It happens a few times where everyone stands perfectly still. I'm curious if it's a special effect shot or if these are actors just standing really still, or if they're professional like street performers that can do the stand like a statue. I don't know, but it's very unsettling and strange. And then once people start moving again, they'll walk backwards for a while and then just kill themselves with whatever's around. That one girl pulls it's almost like a knitting needle out of her bun and just stabs it in her neck and starts twisting it around. The construction workers, dude, that scene. Like a man falls to his death. They're all just so visibly shook. They think there was an accident. And then like another body falls and it's so disorienting. And then when he looks up and you see just bodies just falling off, that visual is so striking. I mean, I am so on board, like so far into the movie. I know it's the very beginning, but like I love the start to this movie. And we get to see a few more widespread attacks. They're technically different scenes, so I won't highlight them just yet. But the girls in the park, the construction workers, it's such a strong start to this movie. It makes this threat feel very scary. Like I said, they immediately go to like assumption of a terrorist attack. Although Mark Wahlberg is cluing into the fact that it's strange that it was a park, and it continues to be parks, and that gives us clues to where the movie's ultimately going. But I think it's a good tone setter. I think it's effective. I think it's strong visuals, and it's going to be my favorite scene in the movie.
I would be inclined to agree that it's a great scene. So good pick. This is deeply unsettling stuff. It really is. Like, it is eerie. It's haunting. It starts us off like an immediate tone, especially that first sequence you mentioned with the needle in the neck and things like that. It's just super brutal, super unsettling, and it sets the tone. It is a very plants show no mercy, man. Like this,
they're like Captain Insano in that way.
Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, you can't trust plants. That's a deep cut. But completely overshadowed my Little Shop of Horrors.
Sorry.
But
I'll separate it in editing. We can both have our moment to
but
shine.
yeah, it's but no, it's wild, and it is, like I said, it tells you right off the bat that this is not normal, and I can't imagine, like, they shut down the schools, they send everybody home, like, I can't imagine how this would, like, be a real, I can't imagine, because this, it wasn't quite this effective and quite that fast, but we had a pandemic hit us a couple years ago, and you saw how everybody reacted to it, and less said about that, the better sometimes, but it is a very effective way to start the movie, and yeah, good stuff.
One note though, those two girls are reading books on the park bench, and one of the earliest signs is, confusion. And the girl asks what she gets, forgetting what page she's on, and the other girl answers her. She goes, "Oh, you're at the place where the killers meet to decide what to do with the crippled girl." And she goes, "Oh yeah," but I was like, "At what? You're at what part? I'm sorry, what is happening in this book?"
Also, the book's open in front of you.
Well, sometimes you just kind of zone out when you're reading a book, Andrew, where you read a page and you realize you don't know what actually happened on that page. We've all been there, right?
Sure.
Or just us ADHD kids. I don't know. But I gotta imagine he's referencing an actual book. But if you know the book where the killers meet to decide what to do with the crippled girl, I am very curious. So please let me know. There's also a scene with the construction workers before the bodies start falling, where the scene starts, we're at the end of a joke. And he's like, "Oh, I see your tattoo is W and Y." And the guy's, "Oh, my tattoo says, 'Welcome to Jamaica, have a nice day.'" It's a joke about a big penis, Andrew. And it doesn't even tell you the whole joke, so it's not that explicit, but I feel like it's there because M. Night's like, this is my first R-rated movie, baby. I can go there. I can put this joke into this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Making full use of it, I suppose.
So let's talk about some of the civilian reactions to the news here. We get some mob mentality scenes. We get some panic scenes, and something that we understood at the time, but obviously there's like a whole new layer to it now. I like the scene where they're in the small town. They're at the diner. And this guy just stands up and says, whatever's occurring, it looks like it's not happening about 90 miles from here. And then there's a pause, and then at once, everyone just disperses, and it's just panic. We have to get away. We don't know where we're going. We're hopping in whatever car we can get into, and people are getting left behind and ignored. And, they're begging for a ride because they have a young girl and they don't get one. And it's this. It's a scene eerily similar to some things we've seen from natural disasters, from panic shopping, from the pandemic, and it's kind of only become more relevant. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I would say if this movie with this story was made now, there would probably be some more stuff woven in about like misinformation and distrust. Just in light of what we went through with the pandemic. But otherwise, like, a lot of the stuff just seems very relevant, like shortage of supplies, people gearing up on ammo because they don't know what's coming and ready to defend their house. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that just made me think of lockdown and the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's the nice way of putting it. I definitely had a lot of moments watching this movie that were also kind of difficult to watch, just because how we actually reacted in this situation and how many people did panic and, clear out whole stores of things because they were so concerned about the future, and other people that did it for far more nefarious reasons. We've seen in real time that when put into a troubling situation, humanity takes a lot of different paths, and there's a lot of different places they go, but nothing in this movie is if you watch this movie and your response was there's no way humans would act like this in this situation, well, guy, I've got some bad news. In fact, turns out we act a lot worse, if you're really being honest. But yeah, it's a lot of that stuff has aged. Arguably, the pandemic just gives it a whole new view, and there's a lot of scenes like that in this movie where it's kind of tough to think about because, you know, there's one little clip. It's just briefly, but you see there's these two old women sitting in their house like crocheting or knitting, and they're both wearing gas masks. And it was really funny. It's in a lighter note. I was talking about The Happening, and my friend was talking about how like he remembered that intro conversation about the bees, and he thought the movie would have been much better if it were the bees. And talking about the air and how we polluted and everything. And I told him that, so The Happening is just a sequel to The Nice Guys. And he was like, what? And I was like, The Nice Guys, you haven't seen it? He was like, no. And I was like, you should watch it because there's a whole bunch of jokes in that movie because it takes place in the 70s in LA about how the bees can't breathe and how the air is dirty and it's killing the plants and everything. So I was like, so if you watch The Nice Guys, then you watch The Happening.
It's like the reaction
see what
to
happens. The Happening is what happens if we don't fix everything in The Nice Guys. And he got to the scene with Hannibal Buress as the giant bee in the back of their car, and I was like, just so good. And you know, it's it like I said, the movie takes on, especially in a COVID world. I guess we can just say it is not really post, but a lot of this stuff just has a whole different look to it, and. Anyway, another scene I want to highlight is featuring a performance we both raved about, but Betty Buckley. I want to talk about her death, basically, and her kind of the ensuing chaos that kind of comes as our climax of the film, because I think this is a really great sequence of events. And if it weren't for John Leguizamo, this probably would have been my favorite scene. But basically... we have this moment where like Elliot wakes up, Mark Wahlberg wakes up, he can't find the Funky Bunch, he doesn't know where to go. He runs into Mrs. Jones, and this is where they have that kind of sequence where she's like, "You're gonna kill me in my sleep," and he goes, "What? No." And that's where that all comes from. And then she kind of disappears, like starts walking through the house, goes outside. A very Stephen King-y vibe here. And I think he actually liked this movie, to be fair. I think Stephen King actually gave it kind of a thumbs up. But, this definitely strikes me as like a Pet Sematary adjacent type performance of somebody being really weird.
I mean, a Stephen King character, I can imagine reading, "You eyeing my lemon drink?" I mean, that's, I don't know what it is, but that is right out of a Stephen King book.
Such a strange thing to say out loud. But,
it's not even lemonade, lemon drink. Who calls
lemon
it that?
drink? No one, absolutely no one. Anyway, she goes out to her garden and she starts walking backwards, and that's Elliot's kind of moment where he's like, "Oh, it's now targeting individuals," as Chris so nicely explained to me before the podcast. So that moment, he's like, "Oh no!" Like, so he closes all the doors. I love that they're like closing the doors and windows, like air still doesn't come through those things, and we can,
you gotta try it. You do what you can, man.
But so he does, like, closes all of them. I'm watching the movie wrong, I know, but closes everything. He's trying to find Jess and Alma. He can't. Doesn't know where they're at. Because to this point, they've believed as long as they're in a small group, they're safe. And this is the first moment we've had where, no, you're not. You're not safe here. And so they run in, and then Mrs. Jones like slowly walks around the house and she starts just smashing her head through windows. And it's really unsettling. Like the way she does it, just silent with everything. She just crashed her head through a window. Does it enough times that she ultimately does die. Or does she die another way? Did I forget something?
No,
or is that
well, we see her smash her head through two, then we don't see her again. So you got to imagine.
Right. So, okay, just making sure I didn't miss anything there. So anyway, she smashes her head through enough windows that she dies, which brutal. Brutal alone. But then now we've got this paranoia that's kicked in of Elliot being like, "Oh, we're done." Like, because I was outside when she was outside, and the wind, I closed all the doors and everything, and he finally like finds like Alma and Jess are like out in the shed on the other side of the property, but he finds this pipe that goes between them so they can talk. And ultimately, he decides, he's like, "I'm not going to sit here alone if this is the end." And so he walks outside, they walk outside, they all get together. And at 9:33 a.m., they realize that's the end. Miss Jones may have quite literally been the last one to succumb to this virus, and they are kind of left in the aftermath of that. But the tension here with Miss Jones and her kind of slow death, kind of crashing the windows and making that paranoia of Mark Wahlberg all the more real, combined with that emotional connection between Alma and Elliot, kind of finally getting themselves on the same page after kind of slowly inching their way there. It is all pretty effective, and it builds to the climax of this film where 3 months later we have seemingly returned to normal, just to see some news that over in Paris's Telluride Gardens, I don't know how to say that, it's French, starts again. So is the thing gonna pass around the earth? Is it gonna slowly do its thing? We don't know. We don't know.
I kind of like how much we don't know. It's something that said at the very beginning of this movie and again at the end of the news report is ultimately this is an act of nature. We'll never fully understand it. Some people might read that as some kind of cop-out, but I think it is, one, true. There's things in this world we'll never understand. And two, it's scarier that way. Like, I think not grasping why it's happening, how it's happening, when it's going to happen is so much more terrifying. And in the universe of this movie, everyone will live in fear forever. I mean, like, as long as these keep happening, it can strike at any time. Like, it's just, you can't destroy the enemy. You can't destroy plants. Like,
Chris, you can't live in fear. No, I'm joking.
Whatever joke you were about to go, abandon right away. Do not go there. Jesus Christ.
No, it is extremely effective though, because it kind of shows that no matter how safe you think you are, it can get you. And yeah, it is.
It's got like
a very kind of haunting ending.
Godzilla 2014 moral of like nature balancing itself out.
Yeah,
you know, like that's what Godzilla is. He's the force of nature that evens out. That's you know, different antagonist and protagonist, but basically the same story.
I like. I thought the ending was pretty haunting, but yeah, I mean, the moral of the story is I made the joke to you in a text where I was just like the planet was basically like, y'all gonna head out. Like, I'm tired of you. And
which,
it kind of goes after him.
I get it. I can't blame you, planet.
Like, that's something again, like where that was such a criticized, jokey aspect of this movie that, it's the movie where the planet starts killing us. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't it? Like genuinely, like that seems like the least ridiculous thing possible at this point. But yeah, anyway, it is that ending sequence though, really, really effective stuff. And just a big, big shout out to Betty Buckley for making that character so unsettling and so
very zombie movie-esque, the vibes I get when she's smashing her head through the window. And I had to remind myself, I was like, oh, she's gonna come kill Mark Wahlberg, but like, no, she's killing herself. Like, that's not what this thing does. It doesn't make it's still scary, but she's not after him, even though it's kind of like the vibes that it's giving.
Yeah.
Andrew, looking through my notes here, Alan Ruck shows up early on in this movie.
He does.
School. He gathers all the teachers together, lets them know there's been an attack, send your kids home and go home. And my note says, because I didn't remember the actor's name, hey, it's Spin City guy. Andrew, that is the first thing that comes to mind when I see Alan Ruck. I don't...
Not Ferris Bueller?
Not Ferris Bueller. I watched... my family watched...
Which I'm fine with. I'm fine with Ferris Bueller not being the first thing you think of.
We watched a lot of Spin City. Like, that was a big show. Like, for some reason, I think that show doesn't have much of a legacy, even though it was really big at the time. But, yeah, that's always the first thing I think of. And I probably didn't... I don't think I saw Ferris Bueller till high school, so I probably saw that afterwards. I like Ferris Bueller.
Not Speed, man.
Fine. I love that movie. I did watch Speed, but I don't know, that he's a pretty small part there. He's in Twister as well, which is, speaking of environmental disaster movies, I love that movie too. Yeah.
Also on Succession.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, Spin City is the first thing I think of anytime I see him. I don't know what it is.
I probably think of Ferris Bueller just because of pure association. Just like that's probably what I saw first. Like I saw Ferris Bueller and I just remember, that character, but he's been around Chicago for a long time too. He does a lot of stuff set in and around here.
I think we're about ready to wrap up, but I got to highlight some more. I keep wanting to say kills, but they're not kills. They're suicides, deaths.
Deaths.
I love the second attack where like the cop just again nonchalantly pulls out a gun, shoots himself in the head, falls to the ground. And the camera is on the ground. We want to see people's feet. Another character gets out of the car in traffic, walks up, picks up the gun. They take a few steps. They kill themselves. We see another character about to pick it up. Like, it's so unsettling. And I think such a cool idea. I love this conceit of the movie. And again, every time we see like this nonchalant kill, death, whatever you want to call it, it's really effective and off-putting. And you probably could have made a PG-13 version of this movie, but the fact that we see some of this stuff, I think, really sells it. I mentioned earlier the attack at the zoo. The guy just wanders into the lion containment just so he can intentionally get killed. Which, by the way, great video quality for a cell phone in 2008. Like, we literally see Zooey Deschanel using her flip Motorola, but this person has like a smartphone.
Beautiful.
Yeah, impressive. Because literally, like the TVs we see are all tube TVs. It's not even flat screens yet.
Yeah, I want to point out that the method of this virus is so interesting to me because it's like because like there's a lot of people I know that would probably say something like, well, why would the virus make somebody like shoot themselves? Plants don't really have any understanding of that. I'm like, no, the plant's not telling you how to kill yourself. It's just telling you to. Like, it's hitting this like whether it's an instinct or whatever in your brain, and so
there's
your
just
brain
enough,
now just
there's just enough science presented to make this like not make sense. Like, oh, I get it, because like they talk about this part of your brain that is there to prevent self-harm, which is a real thing. Like you can't like it's the reason you can't break your own neck. Like if you try to turn your head, your body will stop you before it breaks. You can't choke yourself, and
because you'll pass out. You'll pass out before you stop breathing, like that sort of thing, like stuff like that. Where
obviously there's ways to hurt yourself. We don't need to go there, but you do have this part of your brain that's for like self-preservation. And for one, just turning that part of your brain off isn't enough for you to suddenly want to kill yourself. But again, it's just enough science there to kind of make sense. And it's also, I think, maybe unintentionally making a very dark commentary about society. Is if we had the ability to end it easier, we would, and that would be our first instinct. I don't think the movie's quite trying to go there. But yeah, simply messing with the brain chemistry to be okay with self-harm or desire it, perhaps, is interesting. But like you said, it's not, the plants aren't telling us how to do it, just that this is what we want to do, and we find the first way we're able to do it.
Right, or the path of least resistance, I guess. Like, kind of, and it that seems like an odd way to put that, but kind of the like the gun, the easiest thing available to him right now to accomplish this task. It's like the virus gives you a task, and your brain just goes, "What's the quickest way to accomplish this?"
Yeah,
and so that's when you have people that are doing, guy in a car gets hit, crash the car, perfect. Guys with guns shooting themselves. Yeah, it's really kind of messed up. But the more and more we talk about it, I don't know how much longer I want to keep this path of conversation going. But it's there. Yeah, he gets a lot of like haunting visuals, like the scene where like they pull up to the road and she's like, those animals up there, like it's not.
Oh yeah,
like you in your head know it's not going to be. Like it's not going to be animals. It's people. And she gets that little dig in where she's like, "Got those binoculars you were using to spy on our neighbors." And he pulls out the binoculars and he slowly puts them into focus. And you can see their bodies. And then his immediate reaction of like, you can tell he freezes up, and then she sees it and she knows what it means. And it's all it's very effective. It's
even the stuff that we don't see sometimes, like our army guy here, Jeremy Strong, is saying that something's wrong. I was going out on an errand and I came back to the base and everyone was tangled up in the barbed wire. And it's like, man, you don't even see it. But like the idea that people killed themselves that way is in the aftermath left behind is just so dark and
terrifying.
Scary, and terrifying. Or the conversation that the mom is having with her daughter on the phone. and she's on the phone with her as she gets affected by the virus, stops making sense, and jumps out the window. Like, that is scary, haunting stuff. And here's what I want to say about this movie. I think this is going to sound backhanded, but this is kind of my take on this movie here, is that there's a lot of great ideas. I like the concept of nature attacking, doing it in this way, how scary it is that you can't see the threat. We don't fully understand it. I even like that there's this story of an estranged couple who are drifting apart, and it's only whenever nature forces them apart that they realize they actually want to be together, and they're willing to risk their lives just to be together. If it's going to end, they want to be together. I think that's good storytelling, having that extra layer, having that emotional core to the movie. I think there's some good ideas and visuals, but somehow, #PP, the movie is less than the sum of its parts. We hear the opposite often, like a movie's more than some of its parts. Like, it just has this je ne sais quoi, and it achieves this whole new level. But like, something about this movie, like, I understand the critic reaction a bit. I think some of it's overblown. Like I said, it's not a twist movie. People act like it is. There's some stuff that I get, and we said maybe Mark Wahlberg is miscast, but you put a different actor in there, it's maybe a better fit. I somehow don't think it solves all the problems and flips the switch on the reaction to this movie. So I don't know exactly what it is. I do know I like a lot of stuff in this movie. I think it's a great candidate for a show for that reason. Andrew, you had never seen this movie before last week, and what I told you was, you know what? If you divide M. Night's movies into the good and the bad, it's the best of the bad. Like, there's too much I like here for me to totally just dismiss it. You know what I mean?
The gut check kind of reaction I had to you, #PP, was that I said there's a lot of really interesting ideas, but I think it's the execution that mostly lets it down. Like I mentioned it before, but like, so many people I know are just like, oh, that's the movie where the trees are killing everyone. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, that in itself is not a dumb idea. Like, and I think the poor, I won't say poor, but I think the kind of things that are lacking in the execution have kind of led people to this idea that the concept itself is bad. And I don't think it is. I think the concept is actually pretty strong. I think we mentioned it before. Mark Wahlberg does feel miscast. He feels, and maybe that's what he was. I was going to say he kind of feels out of his depth, but maybe that was kind of the point. Like, he wanted a guy that was going to feel out of his depth in this kind of situation where anybody would feel out of their depth. But when I think science teacher, I just don't think Mark Wahlberg. You mentioned Tom Hanks before we started recording. He would have been perfect at that. I guess that guy who's kind of a science teacher, brainy, and then kind of forced into a situation. There's tons of actors, I think, that could have played that balance a little bit more. I don't know if earnestly is the right way, but struck that balance a little bit better. But like you said, I don't know if that fixes all the issues, and maybe that's alluding to the tone issues that M. Night himself talked about. But there are lots of really interesting ideas here. I think the central concept is actually really interesting. Like, people talk about this concept like it's so dumb, and I'm like, is it though? Like, it's a kind of thing where I think the concept itself had a lot of promise, and then there's just some stumbles in the execution that kind of hold it back from being as good as it could have been.
Well, Andrew, by this point, you've probably seen most M. Night Shyamalan movies. Next week, we're doing After Earth, which I think you haven't seen yet, right?
No.
But we're going to be covering
This
Glass,
is one of the only ones at this point I haven't seen.
Yeah.
At this point, I've seen everything at least once, I think, except After Earth. I think that's the only one that I've kind of kept out of my brain until now, and the show has seen fit to change that. So
it'll be my first time watching the movie as well. I do have a few other holes in its filmography that I'm going to try to fill in this month, just while we're in the M. Night Shyamalan headspace. And by the end, I think we can look at doing some kind of ranking or recap on the man's filmography after we've done such a big deep dive. So look forward to that. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do exactly that. Just hop into our Discord server. There's a link right there in our show notes, an invitation to join our server. And you can just hang out with the community, talk about nerdy stuff, and of course, leave us questions like Reyes has done. Here's what they say, Andrew. The DCEU is about to roll out its final film in Aquaman 2, which by the time you're hearing this, that movie's already out. What are your thoughts, both positive and negative, on looking back on the DCEU? Wow, positive and negative, Reyes. You want us to really go there beyond hashtag PP.
We're not going to go too heavy though, because we don't have all day. This is a question. This is a whole episode of the show at this point. But
yeah, your thoughts on entire cinematic universe, Andrew. Go.
It's a missed opportunity. It every time it felt like the first issue, and I'll say this is try to keep my thoughts as succinct as possible here, is Man of Steel, by all metrics, was only okay. Critical response was down the middle. Financially, it was fine. But when you start your universe on a movie that's just okay, you're not setting yourself up for success. And then your second movie did terribly. Now, people will make all sorts of arguments that, they cut the movie up for theaters and they shouldn't have. They should have released the ultimate cut. I'm not going to get into the debate of that. I think generally it was weird to try to present a big tentpole summer blockbuster that was 3 hours long. I know we've got people that do that all the time now, but at the time I thought it was kind of weird. Mostly because I don't think BVS needs a runtime that long. But either way, reception of that movie, bad. Box office, again, it's fine. It makes some money, but it's Batman and Superman on screen for the first time ever, and it didn't make $1 billion. That's a loss. Everything since then has felt like a weird attempt to course correct to varying degrees of success. The hits are anytime something good came out, whether it was Wonder Woman or something successful like the first Aquaman, everyone was kind of finally like, we're back. We're going to do it. Okay, we're getting on track. And then there'd just be something else that came out and flopped it all back down. It's been an uneven, uneasy ride that has not been easy to follow as a fan of these characters. It has not been fun to watch this. I'm just looking at a full list of films now, and it's a missed opportunity is about the nicest way I can say it. There was just something about it that it started off on the wrong foot. The second foot was even worse, and then everything since then was attempt to course correct, and sometimes they get a hit. You got Wonder Woman in there, you got the first Aquaman, the first Shazam. I even like Birds of Prey. But then even more recently, the Suicide Squad, another hit. But then you got Black Adam, Shazam 2, The Flash, Aquaman 2, all these things that just came out and failed to impress. And so, the last 5 movies of the DCEU, only one of them was received relatively well. And financially, I don't know that any of them really hit the marks they should have. And so, for me, at the end of the day, missed opportunity is about the nicest way I can put it. I think you have obviously these characters that the whole world knows, and they failed to capitalize on that. They and then every attempt to kind of fix it, it's insane to me that this is a 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17 movie shared universe.
Wow.
And almost nobody likes it. Almost nobody likes it, overall. Yeah. You've got even the Zack Snyder fans don't like other huge chunks of it because it's so far departed from what he did. And you've got it's genuinely from Man of Steel to Aquaman 2 is 17 movies. And
that's more than I would have guessed off the top of my head. That's wild.
Yeah, to be fair, Black Adam, Shazam, Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman are all almost in a single calendar year. It's October 22 to December 23 is 5 of those movies. So 5 of them hit pretty fast, which is also insane to think about, that they were like, yeah, we can release Shazam 2 in March, The Flash in June, Blue Beetle in August, and Aquaman in December, and it's going to be fine. And then even one of those is technically Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is just a recut of Justice League, to be fair. So 16 and a half, I guess. But you've got just so many inconsistent things and just different ideas, and it just never got there. I haven't let you talk at all. I'm sorry, but
no, I missed opportunity is a good way to look at it. It's something that's going to be talked about for a long time, just kind of re-examining this thing and what went right, what went wrong, etc. I think you make a good point. I remember reading this like movie preview website I used to frequent that internally they had a plan. They were considering starting with Justice League and then doing solo movies spinning out of that. Basically a reverse of the MCU. Phase 1 was introduce them one at a time, build up to the Avengers. And I think it would have been a cool way to differentiate it. And I also love the idea, especially with DC characters who have been around forever, and many people already know, of like bypassing the origin stuff and just like, these characters, watch them do their thing, interact with each other, learn their personalities as we go. I think that can really work. And I think the superhero genre has really gotten to a point, we finally got to a point where we can do a Spider-Man movie without showing his origin. Like we've got to a point where we can just jump in, like the audiences get it, like jump to the story. Took a long time to get there, but I think Justice League doing that in 2016 or whenever that movie would have come out, I think could have been really cool. They obviously didn't do that, but they did like a half measure. We're like, okay, we're gonna build to it, but with 3 movies before Justice. I mean, Suicide Squad doesn't really build into Justice League, so.
Not really.
They rush into it. I think everybody can agree with that. Like you have Superman, you have Batman just kind of show up in Superman's sequel. It's very
and then it's Justice
strange.
League.
And then it's Justice League.
And then Superman dies in the second fucking movie.
Yeah.
The second fucking movie you shared. So I'm sorry, I'm swearing so much. And then
fine.
Superman dies in the second movie. Like in the second movie of your shared universe, Superman dies. So like everybody knows it's not going to stick. So it doesn't have any emotional weight. And then he comes back in Justice League. Both versions, it's the same thing. But like, it's so wild to look back at. And like I said, I people are going to talk about it for a long time. I think there are movies that I like. I alluded to it earlier. There are movies that I quite enjoy a lot in the DCEU. I mean, I think the first Wonder Woman is still great, even if it does have the kind of classic CG heavy big bad fight at the end. The first Shazam, I really, really like. The first Aquaman, I really like. I thought Aquaman 2 was fine. Little too... I don't know. Campy feels like the wrong word to say about Aquaman, but just doesn't take itself too seriously.
I also think another issue is like the MCU has, you could say, an overall tone to their films and feel. Now, I do
almost
think,
to a fault, yes.
At times, yeah. I think there's some variety in there, but yeah, you kind of know what you're getting from an MCU movie. Which I think it's a big key to their success, but I understand if you get tired of it. The DCEU, I think, also has an overall tone and it's defined by #PP, Zack Snyder's drab, colorless, super serious tone that he sets off with Man of Steel, and moving forward. And so, like, when I think of DCEU, I immediately think of like a gray, soulless, lifeless movie, and I'm like, I'm not even excited to see this. And that's why something like Shazam pops, and I was like, man, do more of this, like fun, optimistic superheroes. Wonder Woman has some optimism into it, and I highlighted every chance I get. For one, her theme rules, one of the best superhero themes ever, and the No Man scene of Wonder Woman. It's probably the best scene in all of the DCEU. It's so powerful. I love it. But we don't think we got enough of that. And ultimately that drab tone drowned it out, especially when Zack Snyder comes back and does another Justice League release. And now it's black and white in a square and it's 5 hours long or whatever. I'm sorry. Look, you asked for the good and bad. I know I'm straying from hashtag PP, but overall,
and then, like, there were so many attempts to revitalize it and bring it back and fix it. Like the most recent being Black Adam. Like, you know, you're 10 plus movies into your universe at this point, and now you're trying. They tried so many of these in-universe reboots, basically, and like even the Flash. We talked. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but like it was supposed to also kind of be this. We're gonna swap Superman for Supergirl, and we're gonna swap Affleck for Keaton, and we're gonna kind of move in this new direction and build like a crisis movie. That was kind of what they were talking about. And Black Adam was kind of this thing where it's like, oh, this is gonna be our relaunch. And Black Adam was supposed to be this super success, and it brought back Henry Cavill as Superman. Everybody was stoked. Everybody was like, Henry Cavill back as Superman. And then at that point, they were going to amend the end of The Flash to have Cavill back as well. But they were still going to do the Keaton thing, I think. I don't remember. But you had all these ideas. Like, Michael Keaton's return as Batman was not supposed to be a one-off. It was supposed to lead to him being Batman in this pseudo DC universe at this point. And it got turned to one movie because so much of the rest of it fell apart. Aquaman 2 is supposed to have a cameo in Batgirl, which got completely canceled. That's an 18th movie that should have come out here that doesn't exist. It's sitting in a friggin' vault somewhere on somebody's hard drive. And that's kind of that's the ending legacy of it, though. The last couple of years with David Zaslav in charge, like, you just saw all this weird, like, The Rock going above people's heads to get Cavill back as Superman in a movie that then failed to impress on a bunch of levels, and then The Flash kind of being this kind of big kind of return to form and kind of being, it's going to be our next big thing, and then kind of getting handicapped by the fact that they suddenly decided that it was just going to be a one-off, and then Blue Beetle being kind of this weird beacon, but it's Blue Beetle. I mean, you know, nobody cares about Blue Beetle, and then finishing off with Aquaman 2, which was one of the last kind of possible instances of like goodwill left with people that like Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and it ends on a fizzle. So the DC universe begins as it started with kind of okay. You asked, dude. I'm sorry.
Thanks for the question, Reyes. Missed opportunity, a lot of excess. Definitely bright spots throughout. I think we can all agree on that, but not.
I will agree with that.
Not enough to really justify.
I will say this. If there was one thing they got right with the DCEU that I will be forever glad that they managed to get right, it was the first Wonder Woman. I was very nervous going into that everything to that point had been kind of shaky, but that first Wonder Woman, maybe it's not a home run, but it's a tremendously solid effort. And I was very glad Wonder Woman we've had a great Superman movie. We've had great Batman movies. I was really glad that Wonder Woman's first shot out the gate was pretty solid.
What are your thoughts on the DCEU? Good and bad. Let us know. Hit us up in that Discord. We'll be back next week as M Night Month continues with the Will Smith movie After Earth. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcats. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the post-credits. The following audio was captured after we hit record, but before we started talking about The Happening. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the new film, The Iron Claw. So we're presenting it here as a pseudo best of the best bonus episode. This is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the movie, we're going to spoil it, so come back to this later. Enjoy. Record. Check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Dude, the Iron Claw, though. Normally, especially lately, I'm like that with sad movies, but I want to see this one again just because it's so good. Like, I haven't stopped thinking about it. Like, I keep thinking about that scene where he crosses the lake and puts the coin down, and it's perfect. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Zac Efron, his performance reminds me a lot of Heath Ledger in Brokeback Mountain. Like this simple man, not dumb, but like, yeah, simple.
Like
But-
simple,
and
almost
like-
to a fault.
Yeah, and you just see everything behind their face. Like it never comes out, but it's always right under the surface. It's so.
Well, he even says it at the end. Go ahead.
Well, it's almost. It's so understated. You can almost take it for granted how fucking good he is in that movie. Plus, he's surrounded
Right.
by a also talented cast. But yeah, real tough. with
Yeah, you
the
can, like-
marketing. I really don't know.
You could easily like I could see somebody being like, Zac Efron doesn't really do much, and I'm like, well, first off, he's got to hold the whole fucking thing together, which is no easy feat. Even if they did go with that haircut, which made him look like fucking He-Man, but but man, yeah, Mark Strong, like, obviously, I think Zac Efron is pretty high in the running for that. Obviously, what's his face from The Bear?
I can
He's
never remember his
great.
name either, but it's them
Jeremy
two
something, Jeremy White,
and-
Jeremy Allen White or something.
and something like that.
And then
the
obviously
dad.
Holt McCallany as Fritz.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to say she's not in a lot of scenes, but the mom.
More
The one
Tierney.
scene where like where she's looking at the dress and she's like, I can't wear this
Dude.
again because everybody saw it, dude. That was like that moment almost like shotgunned her ahead of everyone, where I was like, this single moment is arguably possibly the most powerful like single moment in the film. And I was like, holy shit. That I was like that because like she's kind of lying in the background and like she's doing what she needs to do and she's being fine. Don't misunderstand me, but like that moment was where you were like, oh yeah, you are also really good at this acting thing. And
Yeah.
you
I
showed
feel
up
like
for
she's
that.
like surviving
moment.
by shutting down,
Yeah, like the last
turning
scene
blind eye, or
where she kind of is like, I'm gonna paint, and
does something for
Fritz
herself.
is like, yeah, she's like, I got to do this thing for myself, or there's not going to be anything left. And but dude,
When we
like,
got out
the one
of
moment,
the movie, Rachel was googling. She's like, "Oh, good, they got divorced and he's dead now. Perfect, happy ending."
Fritz is dead. Yeah, Fritz.
Yeah,
Pretty, and not just did Fritz die. Fritz died of
painfully.
I believe it was cancer of some kind. Let me see. I gotta double check because I don't want to speak out of turn on this off the record conversation that's not going to be posted anywhere. But yeah, Fritz died of brain and lung cancer at his home in '97. The couple separated and divorced her husband in '92. So she divorced him not long after Carrie died. Because Carrie dies in oh no, she divorces him before Carrie dies. Carrie dies in '93. Just before. Can't imagine why, but Fritz von Erich is basically the one person in history where I hear he died of cancer, and I'm kind of like, good.
Couldn't have happened to a better
Like
person.
it's like, yeah, it's like if there's one person who I don't mind cancer getting, it's Fritz von Erich. I told you I was having to explain to one of my employees just that like this isn't a Chris Benoit thing where like Fritz von Erich physically like stabbed / shot / killed his
Yeah.
children. But he kind of did. Like, it's the pressure he put on them, the need to succeed, all of that basically broke all of them. Like, David was hurt, needed to rest, and he knew that Fritz wasn't going to let him do that. Carrie lost his foot and was still pushing himself too hard and eventually cracked under the pressure. Chris had the same problem. Never, he couldn't live up to the pressure, couldn't live up to that, and he had that injury with the coma, and he struggled out in the aftermath of that. And then you had Chris, who was smaller and couldn't live up to the standard either. It's like all of them were trying to live in that shadow, and it killed all of them. And yeah, Fritz von Erich.
I like you're talking about, Maura Tierney has that one scene. I think everyone has everyone's so good, but the guy that plays Mike, his press conference after he comes out of his coma, so good. Like, that's another thing that's easy to take for granted. Like, playing, I don't know, the crippled version of the character, that shift. It's just like, oh, so good.
Well, and that was one of the things that I don't know if it was Mike or Chris that said, because Mike ends up being, they took some aspects of Chris and like merged them into Mike. Like, the one line where he's talking to his mom and he says, "I can't be David." Like, that was a very real thing, that because David was basically seen by all of them as like, he's the one.
The breakout.
Like,
star,
David is the one. And he was gonna be. Like, he was being groomed to beat Ric Flair for the world title. And like, that's, and man, just if the Von Erichs take off in the mid 80s, I just wonder what that does to wrestling. Because like, WWF is still the WWF. Like, Hulk Hogan, 84, Hulkamania, all that's already happening. But like, if David beats Flair, and David is this dominant major player in the NWA throughout the 80s, I wonder what that does to guys like Sting. I wonder what that does to guys that came like in the late 80s, early 90s, guys like Rick Rude, things like that. Like, how does that change? Does Sting still eventually get his moment? Because it's not for like 5 years, but like, if David's a major player and eventually that leads to guys like Perry and Work themselves working their way up too, like, wrestling's landscape could have been a lot different going into the 90s, and that would have been interesting.
Yep.
But instead,
I've seen a lot of like memes about how bad Ric Flair was, the actor, and I'm like, I mean, I guess, but like, when I'm watching that movie and like constantly wiping, I'm not like, it doesn't take, like, okay, he's not the best Ric Flair. Like, I don't know. That was like such a nothing to me when I watched the movie, but I've seen a lot of...
First and foremost, I'm at a stage in my life where I couldn't give a shit about Ric Flair, but
Sure.
Even during his peak. But like, I think it's a fine line, because I think if you hire someone to just do an impersonation of Ric Flair, you also run the gamut of everyone just being like, well, yeah, it's just a dude doing a Ric Flair impersonation. I think the movie was better served getting somebody to just do the look and do the intensity versus just getting somebody that was going to do the voice and the mannerisms and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. I think it was kind of a lose-lose. Because, like, I get why people are like, he doesn't really seem like Ric Flair. And I'm like, well...
But I think also
so
with
what?
general audiences, like, everyone knows who Ric Flair is. You don't want him to steal the show from these wrestlers that most people are learning about. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't want to have this big, Although in the locker room,
I agree.
he was like, "Let's go get wasted." I was like, "Yeah, that's Ric Flair."
Yeah.
And the Harley race was spot on. That was pretty good.
Oh yeah. By that point in his career, that's exactly how Harley Race looked
Just
and acted.
huge,
But,
good. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean that wasn't uncommon. I mean, Holt McCallany is in way better shape than Fritz von Erich was, especially by the end. But
I think, like I said, I want to watch it again. I think I go Holt McCallany for the Mark Strong Award because him being such a bastard is just
such a
too
son of a
important
bitch
to the story.
I mean, he's
And
the villain.
so good at it.
He's for all intents and purposes the villain of the movie. Like he
And
really
his,
is.
like-
and like
He's always has a straightforward, matter of fact delivery that always stands out. But it's such a good use here as the villain because he's not like he rarely yells. It's not inherently villainous, but it's the.
I'm not
things
mad. I'm
he
disappointed.
says.
Like that. Like an endless stream.
Times
Like
a
when
thousand,
he's talking
yeah, the
to
most extreme version of that.
like when they win the 6-man titles and they're in the ring and he just casually says that David's going to be the world champ.
Yeah,
And like just ignore like that sort of stuff. Like it's this direct matter of fact, and then just turns around and is like, "Is there a problem?" And Kevin has no choice but to basically be like, "No problem." And like, man, like I can't imagine like being a group of brothers like that and having that happen, and like yeah, you can't help but be a little upset and a little jealous that your dad has suddenly decided that your brother's the golden boy when, 2 years ago you were the golden boy. But it's a wild thing to and then, man, I don't know if you saw this, but like in the aftermath of the movie, apparently like Kevin Von Erich came out and said he thought the movie was too mean to his father. When in reality,
What? I
the
thought he said
movie
was a
takes
good
it too
portrayal
easy
of
on his dad. He says like he likes the performance, but he thinks that it strays almost too far as like making him villainous.
He might be too close to the. He might be too close.
Well, and that's what I was thinking. Like, you think about like, I mean, it's tough to kind of quantify and step away because like almost anybody that knew Fritz von Erich like was kind of like, yeah, he was a real son of a bitch. And again, like it's his dad. Like he doesn't want to be the guy that has to look back and be like, yeah, all my brothers are dead because my dad's a real bastard. Like he doesn't want to see that and doesn't want to face it. And it's a tough thing to deal with. But apparently one of the, because there were more than just the brothers. Like, somebody from the Von Erich family that like knew Fritz or saw or was around Fritz when he was alive. Apparently, like Holt's performance was like deeply unsettling because of how on point it was. Like he like genuinely like was perfect as Fritz Von Erich, and he is. Don't misunderstand me. Like he's very, very good. But woof.
My
Woof,
brother
woof.
said 2 of Kevin's kids signed with AEW. Is that right?
I don't know if they signed, but they showed up. Ross and Marshall. They've wrestled for a while. I don't really know what to do. Yeah, they were on AEW. I think they did Ring of Honor too. I think Kevin was there too. It was like when Iron Claw was about to come out, and I think they were in Dallas. They were like at like a Dallas arena, so they brought in the Von Erichs for a good hometown feel good pop. The cheap pop.
So you saw it with the packed theater. We did too on Christmas Day. I loved the reaction at the very end to the family photo, and everyone slowly realizing there's a baby like 50 feet in the 50 feet, like 10 feet in the air. Like people are like giggling.
No one really reacted to that. No one really reacted to that.
There was like a slow murmur of
whoa, what the fuck?
Yeah.
The biggest moments were Carrie's foot,
the leg,
which again I knew that was happening. Yeah, like me being a smart walking into this movie is like, y'all are gonna hate Fritz Von Erich after watching this. But it was that, and then Jack Jr. That was the other big one where like I guess people kind of like forgotten that, like, because Kevin even says like, he died when he was a kid, like, and then like when you actually see him as a kid, everyone was like, oh no. And I think it's the best way to handle a child dying in a movie. Like it's like dancing around so that rough. To kind of like, and like with just like, oh my god. Well, so he jumps out and he like can jump on his feet and he's on the boat, and I was like, oh, there's Mike and David, and I was like, but then the minute he said like, hey, where's Jack Jr., like I felt it, like it all like through my body. I was like, oh, don't do this to me. I was like, do not fucking do this to me. And then they showed the kid, and I was like, I was done. I was like, all right, okay, we're crying again.
It's and like I won't be able to get that without crying, but it's the fact that he's an adult calling a little kid big brother,
his biggest brother, his biggest
like,
brother. Yeah, it's like, Turkish prison.
Great
my
movie.
God, it's very, very good because hold on, I actually trying to remember, because Carrie is born after Jack Jr. dies. That's
he never met him.
He never met him, and so, oh man, and like the way Kevin describes that too is so understated. I think, like you said, I think people really sleep on Zac Efron, but like when he's telling Pam, and Pam performance really good too. Lily something. She was really good, I thought. As like Kevin's kind of shying away, and she's Lily James. She's very good as he's kind of like shying away and like trying to run away from his
She's
family.
trying to
He's
be
afraid,
patient with him, but reaching a breaking point.
like reaching the breaking point. And that was some of my favorite stuff when Kevin was just being with his kids. I think that was like, because it kind of showed him that he was like, all right, I'm not gonna let this curse fuck up my. But when he's describing how it feels as a kid to lose a sibling, like it's I think it's really understated. But like, you know, he's like, as a kid, like you don't really understand. He's like, because one day he's there, and then the next day he's just not there to play with anymore, and you don't really get it. And I was like, this is really good. Like we're all in agreement that Zac Efron really brought it here, right? Like just making sure that we're all on the same page. But and the movie does play fast and loose with some facts, because like Kevin didn't sell WCCW, Fritz did, and then Kevin tried to get it back. Like that whole thing gets kind of condensed for the sake of the narrative. But
yeah, and I really don't like. I went up and down. I was kind of curious of the changes because like I knew Kerry didn't lose his foot on the same day he wins the title, but
No.
like it's illustrating like in a movie you've got to illustrate the ups and downs, like a high is immediately followed by a low, even if it is like a 2-year gap in your life. Like you would gain nothing by having a little montage passage of time and then the accident. So like it's not a documentary, but from a storytelling perspective, it's making you feel the right things that are accurate to the story. And like I thought there's when David dies, he has that postcard from him that he reads, and that was fabricated. He didn't actually send a postcard before he died, but the other brothers have suicide notes, and so he added that so they all have a message, like
something.
Yeah, which I thought was like that's. And also, the
make some
suicide notes
storytelling choices
are verbatim. Apparently, like they actually left notes, and that's actually what they said, and that's brutal.
Oof.
But
I also did. It's a really really bit part, but Michael Harney is Bill Mercer, the kind of play-by-play announcer guy. I thought he was really bringing that.
What is that guy for?
Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black. It was bugging me the whole fucking movie. Then I had to look it up afterwards.
Yeah.
But
he plays Bill Mercer, who's a real guy.
Okay, I couldn't tell if he was a real guy or like a stand-in for JR, because he gave me a lot of JR vibes.
There were some Jim Ross vibes there,
wrestling
for sure,
commentary.
Yeah, just Southern, Dallas instead of Oklahoma. But he was literally the he was working as a news anchor and reporter with the Dallas radio station the day JFK was assassinated. Bill Mercer was the guy that he plays. So he was a legit newscaster for a long time, and then kind of.
It's like, did you know Michael Cole was a war reporter and he covered the Waco standoff?
Yep.
That dude, yeah, he needs to write a book. Hey, bud, you want to say hi to?
I was hoping Bill Mercer had written a book about.
Sorry, he wanted to.
Hey, Bruce.
I told him no.
Come here. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Angel.
Hey, Bruce. Oh, hi,
He
Bruce.
says hi.
You're much more friendly when I'm far away.
Can you give him Knuckles? Dude, Knuckles up there. Boom. Blow it up.
Boom.
Good job.
Very nice.
Okay. But I'm going to make a podcast, okay?
Okay.
Can you tell him who this is? Tell Andrew who that is.
Batman.
Batman.
Cool.
All right.
Hi,
Love you,
Rachel.
bud. I'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
Andrew says hi. We're about to record, but we had to talk about the Iron Claw first.
I could hear that you weren't actually doing the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think she would have come in if we were actually sounded like we were talking about M Night Shyamalan.
All right. Bye, buddy. I love you.
Episode on that.
Huh?
We should do a bonus episode on it.
We normally try to do it like the weekend it comes out. Plus, I think we would just cry too much. Do a
Yeah.
bonus episode on the Iron Claw.
No, I kidding. No, please don't.